I clutched my abdomen, trying to breathe through another wave of searing pain while my sister Sarah's voice carried across the restaurant. Oh my God, not this again. Can we have one family dinner without Olivia's mysterious stomach aches? The concern on my mother's face quickly transformed into exhaustion. After 8 months of my complaints, even she was starting to believe Sarah's narrative. I was just being dramatic, looking for attention, making excuses to get out of family gatherings. Maybe you should try those digestive yogurts I told you about, Mom suggested half-heartedly, picking at her salad. Sarah's right, honey. You've always been a bit sensitive. I'm Olivia Parker, 28, and for the past 8 months, my body had been trying to tell me something was terribly wrong. But thanks to my sister's running commentary about my attention-seeking behavior, nobody was listening anymore. I'm seeing a new specialist next week, I said, straightening up as the pain subsided temporarily. Dr. Harrison thinks. Another doctor? Sarah interrupted, rolling her eyes. How many is that now? 5? 6? You know what they all say. It's just stress or period pain or your diet. But no, our little Olivia needs to make it something dramatic. The worst part was, she wasn't entirely wrong about the doctors. Each one had dismissed my symptoms with varying degrees of condescension. One suggested therapy. Another prescribed antacids. The last one had the audacity to suggest I was making it up for opioids. This one's different, I insisted, though my voice lacked conviction. He specializes in chronic pelvic pain and chronic pain, Sarah snorted. More like chronic complaining. Remember when she was convinced she had appendicitis during my engagement party? She turned to her husband, Mike. She just couldn't stand that someone else was the center of attention. That was different, I protested, but the memory stung. I'd ended up in the ER that night, only to be sent home with a diagnosis of gas and a hefty bill. Sarah never let me forget it. Different how? She challenged. You've always done this, Liv. Remember the migraine during my graduation? The food poisoning at Christmas? There's always something with you, and mysteriously, it only happens during important family events. I pushed my untouched dinner away, fighting back tears. The pain was building again, a hot knife twisting in my pelvis. But I didn't dare show it now. Sarah would just add it to her list of my performances. I think I should go home, I said quietly, reaching for my purse. Of course you should, Sarah said sweetly. It must be exhausting, keeping up this charade all the time. Mom touched my arm as I stood. Maybe you should try meditation, sweetheart. Your sister might have a point about the stress. I left the restaurant, Sarah's voice carrying behind me. Watch, she'll be fine tomorrow when there's no audience. But I wasn't fine. That night, curled around a heating pad in my apartment, I scrolled through my phone's camera roll. Pictures from 8 months ago showed a different person. Someone who smiled without strain, who could stand straight, who didn't calculate the distance to the nearest bathroom everywhere she went. The next morning, I sat in Dr. Harrison's office, trying to find words that wouldn't sound like Sarah's version of me. The pain started in my lower right side. I began, then stopped. I know everyone thinks I'm making it up, but... Dr. Harrison put down his pen. Tell me about the pain. Not what others think about it, just what you feel. For the first time in months, someone was actually listening. I described the stabbing sensations, the way they radiated from my right side across my pelvis, how they'd grown from occasional twinges to constant agony. I told him about the fatigue, the nausea, the way my body felt like it was at war with itself. Instead of dismissing me, he ordered tests, many tests. Blood work, ultrasounds, and finally, an MRI. 2 days later, my phone rang during another tense family dinner. Sarah was mid-eye roll at my untouched pasta when I answered. Ms. Parker, Dr. Harrison's voice was grave. I need you to come to the hospital right away. Your MRI results, we need to operate immediately. The color must have drained from my face because even Sarah stopped talking. What is it? Mom asked, worry finally breaking through her Sarah-induced skepticism. They found something, I whispered, my hands shaking. They need to operate tonight. Sarah scoffed, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. Tonight? Come on, Olivia. No one operates at night unless it's an emergency. Dr. Harrison's voice cut through on my phone speaker. Ms. Parker, if you're with your family, please have someone drive you. You're not safe to drive with what we found. For the first time in 8 months, Sarah was silent. She had no idea that what the surgeons would find would change everything. Not just about my health, but about our family dynamic forever. The hospital corridor buzzed with urgent activity as Dr. Harrison reviewed my MRI scans. Sarah sat in the corner, still maintaining her skeptical expression, while Mom clutched my hand. The images on the screen looked like abstract art to me, but the doctor's finger traced something ominous. This mass here, he pointed, is approximately 15 centimeters. It's wrapped around your right ovary and appears to be pressing against several major blood vessels. The situation is critical. Sarah stood up, her certainty finally wavering. 15 centimeters? That's impossible. She would have known sooner. A doctor would have felt that during an exam. Dr. Harrison's expression hardened. Unfortunately, this type of growth can be missed during routine examinations, especially when patients' pain complaints are dismissed as psychological or attention-seeking behavior. The pointed comment made Sarah sink back into her chair. We need to operate immediately, he continued. The mass is showing signs of potential rupture, which could lead to internal bleeding. Ms. Parker, you're lucky you got this MRI when you did. Lucky wasn't the word I'd use for 8 months of being called a drama queen while something grew inside me, threatening my life. As they prepped me for surgery, Sarah hovered awkwardly by my bedside. She started, but a nurse interrupted, asking her to step out. The last thing I remembered before the anesthesia took hold was Sarah's face, stripped of its usual condescension, finally showing real fear. I woke up hours later to urgent whispers outside my recovery room. Through the haze of post-surgical medication, I heard Dr. Harrison's voice. The mass was larger than we anticipated. It had wrapped around her appendix and right fallopian tube. The pain she described, it wasn't psychosomatic. She was experiencing severe tissue death. But how did other doctors miss this? Mom's voice cracked. Because they weren't looking, he replied firmly. They heard a young woman complaining of pain and made assumptions. Ms. Parker's symptoms were classic for this condition, but because she was labeled as attention-seeking, crucial early warning signs were ignored. A sob broke through Sarah's. I told everyone she was lying. I convinced Mom not to go with her to doctor's appointments because it would enable her behavior. The surgery was successful, Dr. Harrison continued, but the damage from delayed treatment is considerable. She's lost her right ovary and fallopian tube. The appendix was unsalvageable. If she'd been taken seriously sooner. He didn't need to finish the sentence. Everyone understood what he meant. This could have been prevented. Later that evening, as I drifted in and out of consciousness, I heard Sarah crying by my bedside. I was so cruel, she whispered, thinking I was asleep. Every time you clutched your side in pain, I made it about me. About how you were trying to steal attention. God, Olivia, you were dying inside while I was calling you a drama queen. The next few days brought a parade of ashamed family members. Mom brought my childhood medical records, finding patterns we'd all ignored. Similar pain episodes in my teens, dismissed as growing pains or attention-seeking behavior. Sarah's apologies came in waves. She'd sit beside my hospital bed, showing me screenshots of her social media posts where she publicly admitted her mistake. She deleted every dismissive comment she'd ever made about my pain, replacing them with long explanations about the danger of dismissing women's health concerns. I've been researching medical gaslighting, she told me on the third day. Do you know how many women go through what you did? How many are dismissed, ignored, or labeled as dramatic until it's almost too late? I did know. I'd spent 8 months in Facebook support groups, finding others whose families and doctors had dismissed their pain. Some hadn't been as lucky as me. Their stories ended much worse. A week after surgery, Dr. Harrison brought in my pathology results. The mass had been benign, but its size and location had created a potentially fatal situation. If we'd waited another week, he said gravely, we'd be having a very different conversation. Sarah, who hadn't left my side since the surgery, burst into fresh tears. The recovery was slow, marked by painful realizations. I'd lost parts of my reproductive system because nobody believed my pain was real. My own sister had led the charge in dismissing my symptoms, creating a narrative that nearly cost me my life. But something else was healing besides my surgical wounds. Sarah had transformed from my biggest critic into my fiercest advocate. She accompanied other women in our family to doctor's appointments, ensuring their concerns were taken seriously. She started a blog about medical gaslighting and the importance of believing women's pain. One evening, as she helped me walk the hospital corridor, she stopped suddenly. I know I can never take back what I did, she said, her voice thick with emotion. But I promise you, Olivia, no one will ever dismiss your pain again. Not while I'm around. I squeezed her hand, feeling the weight of everything we'd been through. The surgery had removed more than just a mass. It had cut away years of doubt, dismissal, and damaged trust. What was growing in its place was something unexpected, a sister who finally believed me. 6 months after the surgery, I stood at a podium, facing a room full of medical students. Sarah sat in the front row, nodding encouragingly as I shared my story. What had started as her attempt at redemption, organizing a seminar on medical gaslighting, had turned into something much bigger. For 8 months, I began my voice steady. I was told my pain was in my head, that I was seeking attention, that I was being dramatic. I clicked to the next slide, my MRI image. This is what was actually happening inside my body while I was being dismissed. The auditorium fell silent. These future doctors stared at the massive mass that had nearly killed me, while I'd been prescribed antacids and therapy. My sister Sarah, I gestured to her, has asked me to be completely honest about her role in this story. She was my biggest doubter, and now she's my strongest advocate. Because this isn't just about medical oversight. It's about a culture that teaches women to doubt themselves and each other. Sarah stood up, taking her place beside me at the podium. Her hands shook as she addressed the crowd. I was the worst kind of gaslighter, she admitted. I convinced our entire family that my sister was making up her pain for attention. I created a narrative that made doctors even less likely to take her seriously. The presentation included screenshots of her old social media posts mocking my pain, followed by her recent advocacy work. She'd started a support group for families healing from similar experiences and a website tracking cases of medical gaslighting. The hardest part of recovery, I continued, wasn't the physical healing. It was realizing how many warning signs we'd ignored because we'd been conditioned to doubt women's pain. How many times had other women been dismissed the same way? After the presentation, a young medical student approached us, tears in her eyes. They found a mass in my sister last week, she said. We only caught it because I insisted on an MRI. I kept thinking about your story, which Sarah shared online. This was happening more and more. Women reaching out to tell us how our story had pushed them to advocate for themselves or their loved ones. Sarah's guilt had transformed into purpose, and my trauma had become a tool for change. At home, my recovery continued. The physical scars were healing, but the emotional landscape of our family had permanently shifted. Mom had become almost hypervigilant about everyone's health complaints, while Dad had quietly scheduled his first physical in a decade. Sarah and I were rebuilding too. Every Thursday, she'd come over with takeout, and we'd work on updating the website, adding new resources and sharing more stories from our growing community of survivors. I found another case, she said one evening, passing me her laptop. A woman in Ohio, 3 years of being told it was anxiety before they found tumors in her liver. I read the story, recognizing the familiar pattern. Have you contacted her? Sarah nodded. She's joining our support group next week. Her sister reached out too, said she feels guilty for not believing her. The support group had become a safe space for both survivors and their families. Women shared their stories of being dismissed, while family members worked through their guilt and learned to become better advocates. You know what still haunts me? Sarah said, setting down her fork. That night at the restaurant, right before your diagnosis, I was so cruel, so convinced you were faking. If Dr. Harrison hadn't found that mass. But he did, I interrupted gently. And look what we've done with that second chance. Our website had grown into a database of resources, including a list of doctors known for taking women's pain seriously. We'd started working with medical schools, sharing my case study as an example of how implicit bias affects diagnosis and treatment. 1 year after my surgery, we organized a conference. Hundreds of women and their families gathered to share stories, connect with advocacy resources, and learn from medical professionals who specialize in commonly dismissed conditions. During the opening ceremony, Sarah took the stage. A year ago, I was part of the problem, she began. I was the voice telling my sister to stop complaining, to stop seeking attention, to stop trusting her own body. Today, I stand before you as a reminder that we can change. We can learn. We can do better. I watched from the sidelines, touching the surgical scar through my shirt. The mass that had nearly killed me had also given birth to something powerful. A movement of women refusing to be silenced, of families learning to listen, of medical professionals committed to doing better. Later that night, Sarah and I sat in my garden, watching the sunset. Remember when you used to tell me I was ruining every family gathering with my mysterious pains? I asked. She winced. I'm so sorry, Liv. I know you are. But look at us now. We're actually talking. Really talking, not just performing for family dinners. Sarah reached for my hand. From gaslighter to guardian, she said quietly, never again will anyone tell you your pain isn't real. Never again will I be the sister who doesn't believe. The evening air was cool against my face as I squeezed her hand back. Sometimes the biggest transformations come from our worst mistakes, and the deepest healing happens when we face our own role in others' pain. Sarah and I had walked through fire together and emerged with a purpose neither of us could have imagined.